So we're going to start by logging into the demo data site for acadiancelearning.org. So when you get to the URL, please select that you want to log in with an email, put in this email address and the password, and we will access the demo site for today's training. Oh, yes, I can put the link in the chat. For those of you just joining, please log into this demo data site.
I'm not seeing a place to log in with an email or password.
Let me go to it. So if you go to let's see. My default, so I've got to change it really fast. It should have a spot that you would choose login with email, and then it would look like this. So mine defaults because I've gone to it so many times.
Yeah, see, mine's just taking me to essential training assessments.
So take off the essential training. You just want to have that alo.acadiancelearning.org. So if you've done the essential training site, it may just default to that site.
Okay. All right, there we go. Thank you.
Yes.
Click on that and then take that one.
We still have a bunch of people joining, so we're going to wait on this page for just a minute to allow people to log into the demo data site. Christine, I will have a survey at the end that you will complete to get credit for attending, and then credit will be put in Midas. So those of you who are joining, please log into the demo data site for Acadiance Learning. Yes. I will be monitoring the chat today. And If I don't answer your question, it's because I know it's coming up very shortly in the training that I'm going to be doing, and you will be able to then access that. And I'll be providing that information. So as we go throughout our training today, I know it's very tempting to want to just start exploring the site, but if you could just stick with me and go through the pages and the views that I'm showing you, I promise we will get to everything at some point during today's training meeting. And it will just be very helpful to you if you stick with what I'm doing and showing, so that you then don't have questions afterwards because you miss what I'm talking about because you're looking at something different. So I'm going to drop the demo data site information in the chat so that we can go ahead and move on to looking at those different data sites and views within the ALO site. So the first thing you can do is to access the different data for math and reading. In the upper corner of the screen, you will be able to see this little reading. And if you click on it, it will then open up the math tab that you could then select math to look at math data. And then to go back, you would just select that math tab and it would cycle you back to the reading platform. So you can access both your reading and math data from the same place if your LEA chooses to use ALO for your math as well as your reading this year, which most people have. So the overall scoring legends, there's 3 different legends that we'll look at and are utilized within the ALO platform. So the first one is the little pill bars that are showing students' benchmark status from well below to above benchmark. The next view is the pathways of progress, and they're called fans. So we start with that well above typical at that left side down to the well below typical at the right side of that fan. And then we have the rainbows, and the rainbows are going to provide additional data. It's mixed data for a grade or a class or a group of students. And it's just showing you that benchmark data in a rainbow form. So you can look at the comparisons between how many students are at that well below, at, or above benchmark level in relation to the total number of students enrolled. So the first view we're going to look at is called the dashboard view. This is the view that you will see when you first log into the system. And it provides 3 different information points. The first is just that beginning, middle, and end of year data. You can look at the district, school, or class level. The second one is effectiveness of instruction, and we're looking at how effective the instruction was. It is available at the MOI and EOI time of year because it requires data in the system to compare beginning of year to that middle or end of year scores. And then progress monitoring statuses, overall bar that's just letting you know how are students doing in relation to those progress monitoring probes. There was a question, will we get a copy of these slides? I am going to provide a copy of detailed slides that I will send in through the Midas course. These slides are not super detailed because I am going to spend most of my time on the actual ALO platform showing you what it actually looks like versus just screenshots. So when we look at the ALO platform, your screen should look like mine when you first log in. You can see at the top, we have this A. That's how you get back to this platform. We can see the reading. If we want to change which set of data we're looking at. Right underneath that A is the filter button. That filter button is going to then allow you to change schools.
We're not seeing your screen right now. We're still on the slides.
Huh. Should have changed with that view. Thank you for letting me know. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that is weird that Zoom didn't transition that over. Thank you for saying something. Okay, so this A up here in the corner is where you can go back to this screen. So after we go into our other views, if you want to come back to this main screen, you'll select that A. So we're going to look at this filter button right here underneath the A. That's where you can then filter for schools or classes and change the data that appears on this main dashboard screen. So when we look at the benchmark assessments, that's our little rainbows, and it's providing how much information. So we can hover over a area, a color, and it will then show us the students that are in that benchmark area, how many, and the percent. And we can just go through all of the different areas and look at them. If I hover over a combined area, like where it's 3D-ish, it's going to show me a combined of below or well below, or combined of at or above. I can change my grade level here within my school that I'm at and look at different data for different grade levels. It defaults to the reading composite score. That's the most common one that we're looking at, especially when we're looking at school or grade level data. But over here on the right side, I can also change and select a different measure and look just at that measure's data within this rainbow filter as well. Middle part of the screen is our effectiveness of instructional support. So if you were using MClass, that would have been the correlation report. And it provides the exact same information. We look at where our students started the year and where they are now at, right now, it's selected for the middle of year. So we can look at our well below students. We had one student who started the year at well below and is now below. We had 4 students who started the year at well below and is now at benchmark, and 5 who were at well below at the beginning and now are above benchmark. So this is just that correlation report that you would have utilized in MClass. If you look at this middle bar where it allows you to change the time of year, you can see this little, there's a little rainbow icon that's black at the end. That means we're looking at composite scores. If we select the little fan, it's going to now show you an effectiveness of instructional support in relation to pathways of progress. So you can look at this through the lens of composite scores or through the lens of growth scores. So to change through you can see that there's a lot of different, there's a few different schools and stuff listed within this demo site. The last bar on this view is the progress monitoring status bar. And this is just giving you information about where overall the progress monitoring of your students is landing. So gray means that you don't have enough information about those students. There's too few data points, or they aren't being monitored on the set frequency. And we can't predict how they're doing. If you see red within this bar, it does not mean that the student is at a below benchmark level. It means that their last 3 data points were below their goal aim line, and they're not likely to meet that goal that has been set for them. If they're yellow, it means their last 3 data points are mixed, some above the aim line, some below the aim line, and a prediction really can't be made until we have a little more information. But those are students you want to look at to see like what might be happening, how far off are those scores above and below the aim line. And then green means those last 3 data points were above the aim line, and they are predicted to meet their later goal. So when we're looking at that progress monitoring status bar, we really want to see a lot of green. That means students are making the progress they need to be making and are likely to reach their goals and continue making that progress. Any questions about the views on this page? One thing I do want to add is for printing for the ALO site, there is not any specific place where you can go in and print reports. This view is available for teachers. It's available for administrators, for any user. You would just have limited access. So a teacher would only be able to see their own class with this effectiveness of instructional support and the rainbow graphs and then progress monitoring for their specific class. If you want to print something, you actually go up to the browser bar. You select wherever you print from your browser bar. So in Chrome, it's the 3 little dots up here in the right corner. I select that. I'm going to choose print. And it's going to bring up the data with the actual numbers associated with it. So we can see that we have this beginning of year rainbow, and you can then see the breakdown of the students at the different level. Same with the effectiveness of instructional support. So the print's actually in the browser window. So in Google Chrome, it's these 3 little dots right up in the upper right corner of your browser window. And then you select print. And you can print it directly, or you can save it to a PDF. And that's how you print anything within the system. There is an exporting data function that I will show you in a few minutes that's only available at the admin level. So teachers don't have the ability to export data, but if you have a school level or district level permissions, then you can export data. So this view is that main view. We're going to go ahead and dive into the next view. So everybody, please select My District. And it's going to bring you up to whatever schools are listed in your district if you have that district level access, or it will bring you up to classes and groups if you have school level access. Or if you just are a teacher, it will just bring up your own students. So this page provides you with information about benchmark completion. How many students have completed their benchmark assessments. So this data comes in really for those benchmark windows. So we can look at it, we can see we have 117 complete, 0 in progress, and 7 not started for this school. Then when we want to go in and look at that student list view, so go ahead and select students here. And we're going to see a student list. This is where most of the information resides for the ALO site. In the middle, we can see we can select a different time of year, beginning, middle, or end of year data. We can also select grades. So I'm going to go ahead and select first grade. And I'm looking at first grade end of year data. And we can see that we're looking at reading composite scores at the beginning, and then a breakdown of all the different measures that an end of year first grade student would receive. We can also see pathway scores at the very right screen. And we can see the fan that shows you what pathway did they achieve during the school year. If I select all for the time of year, it's going to just show me my composite scores for the beginning, middle, and end of year, or for whatever time frame you have. So at the beginning of the year, obviously you would just see that beginning of the year composite score data. If I choose the time of year, then I can see my composite score data as well as all of the individual measure data for that time of year. I need to enter in data for a student, for some reason, if they have an accommodation where they're not being progress or benchmarked online, then this three little dots at the very right of the screen, it looks like a sideways traffic sign. You would just select on that and you can input specific data for that student. So the data can all be filtered. So when you look at the time of year in the middle, there's the three little lines next to it. If I select that, it allows me to filter by benchmark status. So I can select, I want just my red and my yellow, my students at and below, or below and well below benchmark. And now those are the only students that appear in my list, students who were at a red or yellow level at the beginning of the school year. If I want to clear my filters, I can clear them and it brings back everybody in the list.
Can you show that one more time? Sorry, it's kind of small on my phone screen and my computer just won't show the zoom.
I'm very sorry. Yes, it is small. Let me go in a little bit. Okay. That will probably make it easier to see. So that time of the year, there's three little lines next to it. If you select that, it allows you to filter by that specific time of year. And you can then filter however you would like to filter that data. This can be very handy when you are making groups of students where you can, or looking just at specific subgroups of students based on their scores. Clear filters here brings you back to everybody being in the list. You can also sort that way with pathways of progress. So if you are trying to figure out what your pathways of progress percentage is, right here I can see I have 387 students total. If I select my pathways of progress filter, so I just go over to the pathways of progress, select the three little bars, I can now select everybody who is at typical, above typical, or well above typical growth. I can now see my number is 198. I can divide my original number, or divide this number by my original number and get the percentage overall of growth for first grade. So it does allow you to quickly filter that information for calculating growth. Teachers can also do this at the classroom level. Clearing the filters. To get this to go away, I just select that little filter icon next to that pathways of progress. So I'm going to give everybody just a minute to just do some filtering and looking at, you can select times of year, which will change your data set. You can change your grade level and just do some filtering within the measures or pathways of progress. You're at the all time of year, you can choose to change the measure that you're looking at for a beginning, middle, end of year. So if I wanted to change to where it's correct for first grade, now I'm just seeing the beginning, middle, and end of year words correct scores. Everything defaults to the reading composite. So there are a number of questions coming into the chat. Every question that has come in, I am going to address in just a minute. So just be a little bit of patient. The next thing I want to talk about is setting goals. So it is really important the goals get set within the ALO system, because that's going to create your aim lines that relate to your path to your progress monitoring. So we really need to make sure that we're going in and setting those goals for students. So when we go into look at goals, if a goal is not set for a student, this little target on the very, very right hand side of the screen will be like grayed out. So if you just select that goal, it's going to bring up the goal screen. The first top of it shows where the student started at the beginning of the year, and then the goal for the student overall for the end of the year composite score. We can see that this student going from an 8 to 260 is well above typical growth, because yes, that's a phenomenal growth. And then we can look down here and we can change the little sliders to adjust where the student is going to be. So we can see just adjusting the slider here, we're still well above typical growth, but now the student is at a below or well below benchmark level still. However, 8 to 179 is still well above typical growth. You can change this slider. I'm still making well above typical growth. Now I've moved this slider and I'm only able to see, or I'm only making above typical growth. When teachers go into this goal setting, if a student is at below or well below benchmark, it will automatically set the goal to be at least above typical level to start closing that achievement gap for the student. If the student is at or above benchmark, it will set their goal to be typical growth. However, the teacher does have to actually go into it and save the goal and activate it. Because if they have not done that, it will just be grayed out. So you get to the goal, it's just at the very, very right-hand side of the screen with this little target. These have already all been set. You can see this one is grayed out because the student doesn't actually have any data yet in order to set that goal. So they do have to have data in order to set a goal. But you can see it's grayed out, and that's what it's going to look like if the teacher has not gone in and actually set the goal yet for the student. So we go in and we can look, this student is set to make typical growth. They started the year at benchmark. So we have our growth for our different measures just set here. And we can see that the student would be at benchmark for everything at the end of the school year. You do need to just go in and look at that. It will, at the beginning of the year, if no goal has been set, it will say like set goal down here, and then you'll just select that button. So the growth is actually when you're looking at the overall growth for your school or for a class or a district, it really is based on what the student's actual growth is. So whether they made typical or better growth. However, when we're looking at students' progress monitoring and the progress that they're making, if a student is below or well below benchmark, they need to be making above typical progress in order to start closing that gap. If they're just making typical progress, they're not closing that achievement gap at all. So it is important that those goals are set at that above typical level. If they don't meet that goal when we're looking at that state data, it doesn't impact that as long as they're at a typical level, but they're also not closing that achievement gap. So the pathway is set and it does align to the progress monitoring aim lines. The teacher can also see what the goal is set to for the student and can compare that to their benchmark scores that they have received. But when we're looking at the actual state data, we're looking at the progress the student made, typical or better, based on the algorithms for Acadian's pathways. So the goals are automatically set if the student is below or well below benchmark. So if I go into this to set it, it will have a goal already set here. As a teacher, you can change it if you want to. It should still stay above typical growth for students who are below benchmark, but you have to actually set, and like there will be a button here that will say set goal. So the system says this is the recommended goal for you, but the teacher actually has to go in and set the goal and look at it within the system. So it's requiring you to think about what that goal is and why that goal is set where it is, and then either change it or just accept it as is. So the growth report reported to the state is not impacted by whatever the teacher sets. So it is based on the actual growth of the student. I would, for the most part, accept the goal as is. However, if I have a student, so one example I can think of is a special education student, and maybe the system has them really high on oral reading fluency accuracy and lower on, this is a second grader, lower on, or first grader, sorry, lower on nonsense words. And so we're looking at that student, we're thinking, really, this student is at a nonsense word level. We're really going to be working on that with that child. So I'm going to set that nonsense word growth goal to be higher and the accuracy goal to be lower. Still making above typical progress. So that's where you might look at and doing some adjustments, is where you're looking at what is the student really going to be working on this year. So you can recommend it as is, but the teacher does have to actually go in and click the button for every student. It doesn't transfer over to their aim lines if you don't go in and set those goals. So it is important that those goals get set so that you can see that aim line on all of their graphs. You can tell teachers that they're just going to leave it where it is. They just have to go in and select it. And anybody actually can go in and activate the goal that has access to the student. So if that's something you're concerned about, teachers changing those goals, you can say you don't do that, and a coach does, or a principal or somebody else goes in and just accepts the goals for the student. But you do have to actually go in and look at it and say, yes, we're accepting this goal. Yes, you do have to have touchscreen devices to progress monitor and benchmark students. So the actual data set can be accessed on any computer. Esther, no, I do believe that you have to go in one student at a time to accept the goals. And no, once you save those changes, they are saved and there's not a way to go back to see that original suggested goal. The key is that for any student who is below or well below, that they need to be making above typical progress within that goals area. So it is important to have that discussion about why do we need to set above typical goals? Because we need to close that achievement gap for those students. So there's a little magnifying glass on the right side of the screen. If you select that, it allows you to search by a student's name or specific ID and pull up that specific student. So I could pull up and search and find this specific student within the system.
Could you show that one more time?
The little magnifying glass right here on the right side of the screen, that just allows you to search by a student's name or ID. So the teachers can view data on any device, but to actually progress monitor, actually to give an assessment measure, either progress monitoring or benchmarking, it does need a touchscreen device, tablet size or larger. So the question was the numbers in the three ovals right under the grade. Oh, yes, those are the cut points for the different levels. So if I'm looking at second grade in the middle, I have 145 is where the well below benchmark cut score is. 190 is separating at and below, and then 256 separates at and above benchmark. So from here, you can choose to export data. So these three little circles right here, I can choose to export student data from this student list screen. So I export the student data. I can choose the school year, benchmark or progress monitoring scores. I can change to being math or combined reading and math data or just reading data, and then I can export the file. Historical data will be uploaded into the system with by the end of September. So ALO does have a lot of information that they've got to upload. So we're giving them till the end of September to do that. And whoever is over your Acadience rating needs to make sure they download that data from M-Class before June 30th. For The student list, if you select all grades, you can export data for all grades. So it just depends on what you have selected here, whether you're selecting for all grades or an individual grade. When you do a mass export, it automatically just exports the data. So it will export all of your benchmark data or all of your data for progress monitoring. And it will do all of the different measures as well as the composite score. So you cannot specify specifically what you want downloaded. It just downloads everything. And then Jody, we'll have a conversation about that at a different time. So there is the opportunity to do some initial grouping within the system. So if you select a time of year, a little 4 square box right here will appear. And if you select that 4 square box right next to the student list, it will bring up initial grouping suggestions based on students' composite scores. So this is just a quick way to look at where students are at and potentially group them. However, we really want to be grouping just based also on our diagnostic assessment data. So this can give you an initial grouping suggestions, but then you really want to make sure that you're also looking at that diagnostic information in order to really pinpoint the skills that students are lacking and that they need to be taught. Let's go ahead and look at the multi-select tool. Multi-select tool is going to be very convenient as you are doing a number of different tasks. So if you go all the way over to the left side of the screen, right next to where students' names are. Oh, if you, Heather, select a time of year in the middle. So if you're on all, it will not work. So you have to select either beginning, middle, or end of year. And then the little gray 4 square box will appear, but that will allow you to look at the grouping for the students. So we're going to look at the student list or the multi-select view. So if you come over here to the very left side of the screen, you'll see there's a little circle next to every student's name. And if I select at the top, it's going to select everybody, or I can select individual students. Change. Change my district because it's not. Some of the schools don't have all the new views updated. So this is where I really can go in and start fine-tuning the ALO website. So one thing you can do is you can create a group of students. When you create a group of students, you can assign adults that can see those students. So you could create groups across grade levels. You could create groups within a grade level. You could create groups of special education students and share it with the special education teacher. You can create groups that paraeducators or your interventionists are working with so that they have access to the student data and also access to the student to progress monitor them. So creating groups is going to be your friend for providing that information to other adults in your building. So if I create a group here, I can name it. I can review the students that have been added to my group. And it's not letting me add at that. I can also add adults to the specific group that it then allows a different adults to see who, or to see the students that are within that specific group. Demographic data is, some of it's available through the download export feature, but it won't be added into the actual platform that teachers have access to. So from this, we can also enroll students in progress monitoring. It is really important because all students, in order to be progress monitored, have to be enrolled in progress monitoring. You can't just go in, well, you can, but they won't have graphs that appear and they won't appear in your different data sets until you enroll them in progress monitoring. So we can, just gonna go find all of my students at the beginning of the year who were at a red level. So now I've filtered and I only have my students at the beginning of the year who were at a red level. I'm going to select all of them. And now I'm going to choose to enroll them in progress monitoring. So I can see I have 27 students selected for this. I'm going to add a new K-6 enrollment. I select the measure of that I'm going to do. If I choose oral reading fluency, it also requires me to select the level, and the level just means the grade. So I'm going to select level 1, and I'm going to select the frequency as every 2 weeks. So for students who are below or well below benchmark, or sorry, who are well below benchmark, that frequency does need to be every 1 to 2 weeks. I could select 1, but I want to make sure that I give a little wiggle room for people. So I'm going to select that frequency for every 2 weeks so that it doesn't impact my overall progress monitoring data. So then I add the student here, and those students have now been added. If my list changes and my interventions or my intervention has changed, and so my progress monitoring needs to be changed, I can enroll or unenroll students here and take them out of that progress monitoring and change that for the students. So the progress monitoring enrollment, students do need to be enrolled in that progress monitoring. So students can be in multiple groups at the same time, and you can share that student data by adding the adult to the group that has been created. So I can see here, I have 56 classes and groups here because this is a demo site. And so lots of different, my classes are all at the beginning, and I can select my groups here. And now I can see all of the groups that have been created and the number of students that are enrolled in those. If I select it, it brings me to that specific group with the students enrolled in that group. So when we're looking at progress monitoring, if I have added students to a measure, I can then unenroll them as well. So this is where I would progress monitor. These are the 22 students selected. So if I needed to just do one student, so I can select the one student and I can then change their progress monitoring. So this is what we currently see. I can unenroll them in the progress monitoring. So if I take it off, now they do not have any progress monitoring enrollment. This little PM next to their name does mean that they are enrolled in progress monitoring.
Teresa, can I ask a question?
Sure.
If you enroll them, say like you want them only on first sound fluency, when the teacher goes to progress monitor, is that the only thing that's going to come up, or can they choose to progress monitor something else?
They cannot choose to progress monitor anything else. So that is what is going to come up. The measure they are enrolled in is the measure that is going to appear for progress monitoring.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it is a nice feature because it's saying this is what they're enrolled in, this is what you're progress monitoring with. So the classes do have a default name through the uploaded data. So it is going to be by the teacher's last name for classes. Groups can be named whatever you would like to name them, but the actual classes have the teacher's last name as a default because we're rostering through the state. Through this view is also where you would generate parent reports. So any student's name that you have selected over here, you can choose to generate the parent reports. You can choose English or Spanish, and it will create the parent reports. When you look at it like this, it looks like it's all on one page. But if you go to select print, it will print them out on different pages. So every student's is broken out and just on one page. You can choose to progress monitor more than one measure, but it's not recommended to do that. So it is recommended that you're progress monitoring in the measure that the student, that is aligned to the student that is for the intervention that they're receiving. And that's really the recommendation for that progress monitoring. When we get to the student detail view, I'll talk a little bit more about progress monitoring and off-grade progress monitoring and how that works. So yes, you can progress monitor off-grade level and on-grade level. If you're looking at a student who is off-grade level, that would fall in with like every 1 to 2 weeks, most likely, because the student's going to be at that well below benchmark level. I wouldn't do grade level more than monthly, because you're not going to see very much progress for that student if they are at that well below benchmark level and need off-grade progress monitoring. And will just be frustrating for them and not provide you with the valuable data that you need to see if they're making progress. Okay. The last view from this view where you have all the circles is this view print student graphs. And that's going to show you student graphs. If we select show pathways, it will print in color, or we can do it in black and white. And it's going to show all of the students that you were selected. So if you want to look at student graph data and their progress monitoring data for a whole group of students, this is the format what you're going to want to use. And then you can either print it off or just look at it on the screen. And this is the only way to see multiple students' data points for progress monitoring and benchmark all together, except for that download export button. But as a teacher, you don't have access to that. So if you're wanting to look at a group of students and see what progress they're making within their pathways of progress, this is the best way to do that. So you would want to select the group of students and choose view print student graphs. Any questions about those views when we're selecting the multi-select tool? So to get to groups, I go into my district. And then once I've selected a school, if you, whatever classes and groups you have been associated with will appear right here on this main screen. So here's all the classes and groups. I can see classes here in the middle. If I want to see groups, I select groups. And then I can see I have staff and then I have students. Yes, teachers can assign other staff members, as long as that staff member has been input into the ALO system and given permissions to see student data and assess students. And that's something that's going to be done at the LEA level by whoever is in charge of your Acadience reading. And they may say at a school level that you're going to input other staff members, but they will have training on that in July on how to input other staff members outside of teachers. So if I select the students, I don't want to be in classes and groups. I want to just select students. So go ahead and select a list of students. So once I have selected students, and I can see that I'm in the student list because students is underlined in green, and it says student list versus classes or groups. Then I can use this little drop-down menu over here. So on the right side of the screen, there's a little green arrow with the 3 lines next to it. This is the drop-down menu. If I select my drop-down menu, I can see a couple of different things. I can see a benchmark overview. This is giving me a overall benchmark view. So I can see my reading composite score, and it's the rainbow view, and I can see the different measures underneath it at the same time. So on that first data platform, I can only see one measure or composite score at a time because it only is giving me one set of rainbows. And this benchmark overview is going to break down the reading composite score and every individual measure as well. And so this is a great one that you can print. And I can see my composite score and the individual measures for that, all of the students that have been selected. So if it's a teacher level, you would only see the teacher's class. So the way you get to this score is you do have to be on a student list view. So if you are under schools here, and I can see it defaults to classes and groups. So you can see this classes and groups is underlined in green. I need to change it and select students. Once I've selected students, and now students is underlined in green, now I can see these other drop-down options. So the benchmark overview is that first one that I just showed you, where you can look at the reading composite score as well as little rainbows for all of the measures for that specific time of year. Or the whole year if you choose all. Then we can look at benchmark status. And benchmark status is able to bring it up. If I have all selected, I can see everybody's class. And so this allows me to look at it by class. If you can't see the drop-down menu, you have to make sure the students is selected. So up here, right underneath where it says the name of the school, there'll be classes and groups, staff, and students. Click on students. And then you will be able to see the drop-down menu. If you're under classes and groups, the drop-down menu does not appear. And if you were in a class and group and you selected a specific and yours just looks like this, the drop-down menu does not show very many options. It only shows you the benchmark overview and the progress monitoring status. And this is what a teacher is going to see. They're not going to have those other two reports. They're just going to see the benchmark overview and the progress monitoring status. If you want to see an entire school and the other drop-down things, you have to go back out to the demo to the school level, and you can see that now I'm at the school level and I can select all the students within the school. That will give me access to the other drop-downs. And the reason is because only at the school level can you see this benchmark status, because it's comparing classes, and we're not going to give teachers access to every other teacher's data. So that benchmark status is only available at a school or LEA level. And then the historical benchmark is if you want to filter and look at specific years of historical data, and that's every student in the state, or sorry, every student in your school or LEA. And so again, it's not available for teachers. It's only available at the school or LEA level. And when you have in your historical data, you will see multiple years here that you can select from to look at that historical data. Then I can go back to my student list view. And now I have my list of students. And if I want to look at progress monitoring status, which is also available at that teacher level, this is really showing me at the individual student level what that progress monitoring data looks like. So we can see these are all the measures that the student is enrolled in. Because this is a demo site, they've been enrolled many times into progress monitoring. And then the ones, when it's gray, it means that we do not have enough data for that student. And so the first few weeks and months of school, these boxes will all appear gray. So if a student is enrolled for every 2 weeks, there will be information within these little triangle things after 6 weeks. If they're enrolled once a month, there won't be any data until they've done 3 months worth of progress monitoring. So it does take 3 data points in order for information to populate on the progress monitoring status screen. But I can see this student, Lewis, and nonsense word fluency, it is at a red, which means the last 3 data points are below the aim line. It tells me that right there. If I click on it, it takes me to his individual profile. So I can see this student is at a yellow, so mixed above and below the aim line. Is there anyone that's a green? There's no one in green right now. So the green would be the other corner of the other part of the triangle, and that's showing the students' last 3 points were all above the aim line. So as a teacher, if you're looking at this, you're only going to see students who have been enrolled in progress monitoring. So you won't see your entire class, just students who are enrolled. And this is really where you're going to want to look to see how is the progress monitoring working for students. Any student who is at a red, you're going to want to really look at what's happening with instruction for that child and the interventions, because the interventions are not working. The student's not going to reach the goal that has been set for them. And that's where you want to make some type of adjustment. So Jody, you do need to have all historical data downloaded from MClass by June 30th. Nobody, not even me, will have access to that data after that date. So please make sure you get that historical data downloaded, and after all of your assessments are done for this year, please make sure you get that last set of data downloaded in June before that June 30th deadline. And then ALO will be sending out information once your your account has been created on a secure file share to upload all of your documents and then send them over and input them into ALO. If you're currently using ADM for reading, you do not have to download data. ALO, it's the same company, it's both Acadians, just their different platform. They said they will download the data and upload it themselves. Rebecca, you do need to download it in that Excel spreadsheet within the M-Class system. So if you have questions about that, I will drop in the chat just the document information, or a document that has information specifically about how you need to download the data and what that information should look like. So there is a request for a specific file naming convention. So let me put that in there. And that has information about what needs to be downloaded and what naming convention you should give it to just simplify things for ALO when they get a whole bunch of files from schools all over the state. I am not reviewing the assessments today. This is just focused on the platform and the data and reporting side. So if you need the actual assessment training, that is a different training. And I'm happy to provide that information with a link to all of the different trainings that I'm doing as well. And let me drop that link in the chat. So that link I just dropped in the chat is to the training site. And then this link is to the vendor change FAQ document that has information about downloading your files. So the math side looks exactly the same as the reading side. And so the data is just math data versus reading data, but it looks exactly the same. So if I go into the math, I'm currently on the PM status view on the reading, and it put me directly onto the PM status on the math as well. So it just has math data instead. So that the red triangle means that that last 3 data points are below the aim line for that student, and they are not likely to meet their goals. And if it's yellow, it means it's mixed. And if it's green, which I didn't have an example here, then it means that the last 3 data points are above the aim line. And yes, Heather, only M-Class users need to download their data. So if you are currently using ALO, it will transfer all of your data seamlessly. If you're using ADM, the Acadians has said that they will transfer your data into the ALO system. Find where I'm at with so let's look at the so one of the important things, remember, is to set that goal. So that creates that aim line for looking at your interventions through progress monitoring. And it's really important that we're closing that gap for students. So we can see this student, the yellow line is a student at benchmark. The blue line is a student at well below benchmark. If they make typical progress, they stay exactly the same distance from that benchmark goal as they were at the beginning of the school year, because that benchmark goal was also typical progress. If they make above typical, which is that orange line, we can see that that gap is closing for that child. And if they made well above typical growth, we can see they actually end up above the benchmark line. This is in first grade. It doesn't work quite as smoothly in the older the student gets. If they're really well below benchmark, it's harder to get to that benchmark line. but they still need to be making that above typical progress to start closing that achievement gap and get them closer to that benchmark line. So ALO will automatically accelerate the aim line for any off-grade progress monitoring to just be half a year. So if this aim line were going all the way through May, it would not be near as steep. And so they look at that off-grade progress monitoring. We don't want a student to be on off-grade progress monitoring for a full year. We want to accelerate their progress and get them to that grade level progress monitoring as quickly as possible. So the aim lines are automatically made more difficult for off-grade progress monitoring. And you can use that information when you're looking at those scores, that the red is going to be compared to reaching that goal at the half a year mark versus all the way in June. So here's the out of grade guidelines. So if students not making progress at that grade level probe, you're going to go back until you hit the appropriate side on the left side of the chart. And you can look at that for starting the school year. So if we look at a third grade student and their composite does not have 90% accuracy and 50 words per minute, then we're going to want to progress monitor at a second grade level for that first probe. And if then for that first progress monitoring probe, if they don't reach 90% accuracy and 40 words per minute on a second grade passage, we would move them down to a first grade passage. If we have a student who is a third grade student who is working on CVC words, then we would be progress monitoring on nonsense word fluency instead of oral reading fluency, because we want to align the intervention for the students' progress monitoring. We want those two to align so that we can really see, is the student making progress? Question, I do not know if there's out of grade guidelines for math. I am not over Acadian's math, but I am happy to drop my cohort, Jared Wright, who oversees Acadian's math. That is his email. You are welcome to reach out and ask him that question. There is not a manual about the data and reporting platform that you can download. They do have under their resources help guide things for different things. I will be sharing slides with you, and I also created a one-page document for teachers and a one-page document for admin that just shows different views and what information can be found in that view, and the little icon type thing that you click on to get to that view. So it doesn't provide everything, but it will just be a good resource to look at, to think, oh, how do I do this? Or how do I do progress monitoring? What do I have to select in order to do that? So when you're looking at if a student is ready to move off that off grade level, you go up the right side of the chart. So if we had our student reading at first grade passage, if they can read that first grade passage at 90% accuracy and 47 words per minute, we would unenroll them out of first grade fluency and move them into a second grade fluency passage. And once they have met that target, then we would move them to that grade level passage. So that's the way the out of grade guidelines work. And this information is in the PowerPoint that I will share with you as well. And then when we're evaluating that progress monitoring, we really need to regularly review that. And it is important the teachers are reviewing this data. And if those 3 consecutive points fall below that aim line, if that student's little triangle is showing red, then we need to think about what could be modified in order to help that student to reach the goal and make the progress. So we really want to make sure that things are aligned, so we're really providing good information. If we have a student who is a well below benchmark and we're progress monitoring at grade level, it may not be the appropriate progress monitoring for the student that's really providing us information about whether or not they're going to meet that instructional goal. Okay. let's move back over to the demo site. So there's one last view. It's this student detail view.
Teresa, before you move on, can you answer that last question in the chat? Can teachers enroll and unenroll the progress monitoring, or is
Yes.
that just admin?
Teachers can enroll and unenroll the progress monitoring. So anybody can enroll or unenroll students in the progress monitoring. So if you can set up guidelines for it, how things are going to work within your school or your LEA, but everybody does have access to that information. So the last view we're going to look at is the student view. So if I select a specific student, I can see some different information for the child. So it defaults me to an overview page. I can see the student is at a well below benchmark level. I can see their pathways of progress was also well below typical growth. I can see any classes or groups that they have been assigned to. And then on the overview page is where I see the individual student graphs. If there is no color, the color is that pathways of progress. If there's no color, it means that it is an off-grade progress monitoring. And off-grade does not have pathways because pathways is aligned to a specific grade. And if we're doing off-grade progress monitoring, we don't have that pathways data. So the little target is the end of year goal. We can see the student started here at this level. We can see the data point, when it was done, when the measure was given, and all of the information about the individual measure for the student. The aim line is this solid black line here, and that's the goal for that child, the aim line goal for the child. You can select stuff off if you want to. One feature that I really like here, Jamie, I am not positive if the color shows if the teacher hasn't set or saved the goal yet. Because I don't know, I'm going to have to look at that up. One feature I really like here is the add intervention line. So I can add an intervention. I can put in the date that the intervention started, and I can add a description. This is very helpful if you are tracking a student potentially to see if they're going to qualify for special education, or if when you are doing your interventions, if a student's last 3 data points are below that aim line and you make a change to the intervention, you can add this line. Once you add a line, I can see it has now appeared on all of my graphs. Here, I can see my intervention line. I've added 10 minutes a day. I'm going to see if this is now going to make a difference for this child. If now I'm going to see their progress improving and getting above that aim line. So when I'm looking at my progress monitoring data, I want to look at data after the aim line, because that aim line is saying a change happened. So I can really kind of ignore the stuff that was before then. And now I want to look at what is my data now that I've made a change to my interventions. And so if you have a student you're trying to see if they'll qualify for special education, you can track any changes to reading interventions through your ALO site by adding an intervention line, showing that something has changed with instruction for that child. You can put in that note of what the change actually was, and then tracking the student's progress after that aim line to see if you see a change in their scores. The second view you can see from the student profile, so we're selected a specific student, is the assessments. So if you're following along with me, go ahead and click on a student and let's look at assessments for that child. So this assessments bar is going to show me all of the information for their benchmarks for middle, beginning, end of year, as well as progress monitoring data. The progress monitoring data is at the bottom, so I can go in and see the individual measure information for any progress monitoring that has been done for that child. In the demo site, if there's a little check mark next to that child's name, or a little check mark on the line, it does mean there's actual data in the system. So I can click on this and it actually shows me how did the student score and how did the student respond on every item. So I can go in and look at that individual measure data for that student. This is super valuable, especially for your kindergarten and first grade teachers, to go in and look at the errors that students are making and the things that they're getting correct to inform their instruction. Can also be valuable for when you're looking at oral reading fluency to see why was a student's accuracy low? Are they skipping little words or are they missing a lot of multisyllabic words? Those skills are very different. If they're skipping small words, it's really a fluency issue, and you would provide instruction about making sure that we're reading every word. If it's multisyllabic words, that helps you know that the student is struggling, and it's really important they get that diagnostic assessment to determine what phonics skills that they are lacking. Yes, so we can see the detailed view for benchmarks as well, although, let's see, maybe this one has it. Yes. So we can see here's the benchmark end of year. We can then see all of the individual scoring data for that specific measure. So as long as the assessment measure was given within the ALO platform and given through that online assessment, you can see this data for that child. This is also where you would invalidate a measure if you needed to invalidate. So it is done through the data reporting platform, not the assessment platform. If you choose to invalidate, you have to type the reason, confirm the invalidation. You can also uninvalidate. So if a measure has been invalidated, a score bar will appear there. It'll just be grayed out, and you can select it and then uninvalidate it if you need to do that. So if you go to the student profile, so I've selected a specific student. So on my student list page, I just select a student's name. You go to assessments. And then I can select a measure. So within the demo site, the only time you can see the actual data, so if I select this one, it says student responses are unavailable because it was manually input. But if you look at the right side of the screen, if you see something that says 2 results or in progress monitoring has a little checkbox, that allows you to be able to see the actual student data. So I select that and it's going to bring up the how the student actually responded, and that's where you're going to invalidate a measure. Anyone can see the detailed data who has access to the student. So if the student is in a group and a paraprofessional or a special education teacher has access to that group, they can see this individual student level data. And anybody can invalidate. So it is teachers and assessors do have that access to invalidate, but you can uninvalidate, and there is a record of still showing of that invalidated measure on the student's profile, and you can uninvalidate if that occasion arises. Yes, anybody can invalidate on both progress monitoring or benchmark measures who has access to the student's data. You can assign paras and teachers different access levels to a certain degree. If you want paras to have access to the actual student data, then you would be assigning them the same level as a teacher. If you want them to just be able to progress monitor the student, then that's the assess level access, and that's not the same as the data level access. So teachers have both the assess and the data level access, and when you put people into the system, you assign what access they have. So if you have a testing team, you most likely are just going to assign them assessment access. If you want your paras to be able to see the student data for groups that they're working with, then you would want to assign them data access as well as most likely assess access. So it depends on what you want them to be able to see and do within the system. The last view you see within the student view is their enrollments. So we can see all of the groups or classes that the student is enrolled in. These demo students are enrolled in lots of stuff, and we can select it and bring up that group. So it's just providing information about their enrollment. And I can look from here. I can also do an enrollment. If I want to do a progress monitoring manual entry, this is also where I would do it for that specific student. I can generate a parent report from the student for the student from the individual student profile. When I'm looking at the graphs, if I want to look at just one graph in a larger view, I can change it from all scores to just looking at a specific measure. And then it provides that graph with a much larger view, so it's easier to see the little data points throughout the graph. Or I can go back to all scores and see all of the students' graphs. So as far as assessing with benchmarks, it is very mixed. We have some of our LEAs that have a testing team that goes out and it does all of the benchmarking for every single school. We have some schools where there is one person or a group of teachers or a group of paraprofessionals that does all of the benchmarking. We have some schools where the teachers do the benchmarking. So it really just depends, and it's very much at the LEA level, a decision that you need to make. Most people do have teachers or paraprofessionals or a combination doing the progress monitoring. I would say that is across everybody, that teachers and paras do all of the progress monitoring. Okay, let's go back. I did want to show you. Oh, no. No, this is not showing it. Some of the things are not available in every school's view, so let me see if I can see it here. It is not showing. So typically when you go into progress monitoring for a student, so if I am selected a specific student, I can choose progress monitoring enrollment. And I can then look and see what the student is enrolled in for progress monitoring, and this is where I can unenroll or re-enroll them into different progress monitoring measures. So with that has to be done. And it's better at the student level. You can do it through the group as well, unenroll or enroll students in progress monitoring. And I wanted to. It is important that you only enroll students in progress monitoring that you're actually going to progress monitor. So in order for your data to actually be accurate, especially when you're looking at this main dashboard, you want to have your progress monitoring status bar to be full of color, hopefully green, but we don't want gray. Gray means that they're not being progress monitored at rate, or at the very beginning of the school year, you will see gray because you won't have enough data points yet. But you want, if you enroll everybody in progress monitoring, but you don't actually do the progress monitoring at rate, then your bar is going to have a lot of gray in it. And it doesn't provide you information about how the progress monitoring is going in your school. So please make sure you just enroll students in progress monitoring that should be progress monitored so that you're getting the right information. When I go to look at progress monitoring progress, I actually have a ALO provide me with reports so that I don't have to go in and look at every single individual school and their progress monitoring status. And they actually go in and look specifically just at well below and below benchmark students and pull up their progress monitoring data. So if you did have students enrolled in progress monitoring that were at benchmark that were gray, it would not impact when I go in and look at your data, but it will impact when you are just looking at your progress monitoring status data. Let's see. So Emily, it is not recommended to progress monitor students before the measure. So Acadian's guidelines and the guidelines at the state level is that we progress monitor to show if interventions are working for the child, not to see how they're going to do on an assessment. So the recommendation is that teachers monitor fluency within their own classrooms and instruct in reading connected text, but that progress monitoring is really designed for those who are receiving interventions and to not progress monitor for a measure that the student actually hasn't been assessed on yet. Because the expectation is not that the student can meet that level yet, because the measures are very much aligned to students' abilities at specific times of the year when we're looking at our kindergarten and first grade. So Tracy, your question is, next year, are students at benchmark considered below grade level? So Acadian's measures are assessing students at risk level. So a student who is at benchmark has a 80 to 90% chance of dropping the next benchmark. Students who are at that above benchmark line, that blue level, they only have a 10% chance of dropping to a lower level by that next benchmark period. So Acadians is really measuring what reading risk is a student at. If they're at a well below benchmark, then we're saying that they only have a 30% chance, 20 to 30% chance of getting out of that level on their own without some intervention, serious intervention from the teachers and the school. When we're thinking about what reading on grade level is, reading on grade level is been set as a mark because of SB 127, We're looking at having 70% of our students reading on grade level by the end of third grade, and I think it's 3 years now. That reading on grade level mark as a cut score has been set at that above benchmark level for first, second, and third grade. And that means that the student is likely to be successful on our RISE assessment. So when they're looking at reading grade level text, they're able to read grade level text with that deeper, higher comprehension than a student who is at benchmark. Students who are at benchmark are less likely to be proficient on the RISE assessment in third grade. And it doesn't mean that they can't read connected text, but it just means that they struggle with some of those higher order comprehension questions to be able to answer those within the RISE assessment. Green is not included as needing progress monitoring because according to Cadence, we do not need to progress monitor students who are at that green level, and SB 127 does not require that. So when I'm looking at progress monitoring fidelity, it's really at that below and well below benchmark level. So yes, Rebecca, in order to meet the goal that's been set by SB 127, we do have to have 70% of our students in third grade at a blue level. And so that's a very lofty goal. And we're working, and I know that teachers are working and schools are working to help reach that goal. And we have seen a lot of progress within our kindergarten students and our first grade students, and our kindergarten data this year is looking really great because we have so many kindergarten students who are going all day. Jody, if you have a third grade student who hasn't passed nonsense word fluency, I would progress monitor with nonsense word fluency if it aligns with the interventions that they're receiving. So if that child is still receiving instruction around CVC and VC words, then that aligns to nonsense word fluency. If they've moved past that and they're now working on long vowels or vowel teams, then you would progress monitor with a first grade passage, most likely. So we really just want to make sure our progress monitoring and our interventions align with each other so we can use that progress monitoring to see if the student is making the progress they need to start closing that achievement gap. I hope I've answered all the questions in the chat. If you had another question, then, oh wait, I just saw. No, Tammy, there is not a way to pull progress monitoring fidelity by teacher currently. So it is something we're actually in discussions with ALO, that progress monitoring is a big deal in our state and that we really need some additional progress monitoring reports that are available at the admin level. But currently, the two views I've shown are the only things that you can see. So you can see this progress monitoring status bar, which shows you you could go in and look at that at the teacher level. So if I filtered, I could go in at just select this teacher, and it's just going to show me the progress monitoring status for that teacher. And if there's a lot of gray, it means those students are not being progress monitored at fidelity. So I would want to see very little gray on this bar when I pull up that individual teacher. But there's not a report that you can pull all teachers at the same time. So you would have to go in and look at each teacher's progress monitoring individually. And then, so Rachel, there's two things we're talking about. Currently, the growth goal for the students who are making typical or better growth has been at 60% for both reading and math this last year. Next year, it's actually, the goal is changing to 65%. I know for sure for reading, and I'm not sure for math. This other 70% goal is not related to growth. It's actually related to composite scores. And that is also aligned to SB 127, that 70% of students are at that blue above benchmark level. And that goal is for within the next 3 years. So after this year, 3 additional years to have 70% of third grade students at that blue level. The growth goal is separate, and that is still looking at the pathways of progress and making typical or better progress. And it is now reading progress goal is now at 65%. Math does not currently have any specific goals for students being at a certain composite level. Only reading does. And I'm not sure if the math progress goal for pathways of progress has changed or not. I know the reading one has, and it's 65% for next year. The last thing I wanted to show you on this page was the actual assess button. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, you can see this assess button. So if I select assess, it defaults to benchmark when it's the benchmark time of year. And I can see here's all my students in this list who need to be benchmarked. I can filter the students by specific classes or groups or school, depending upon what permissions you have. So if I want to just do this first grade group, now here's all of the students that I filtered and the measures that they need to get for benchmarking. I don't have the app installed, but if you select that on a touchscreen device, it's going to open up the measures for that specific student. And it will just have a list of all of the measures that child needs to take. And you would just go through and give all of those measures for that child. For progress monitoring, if I select progress monitoring up here at the top, I'm going to see all of the students who need progress monitoring. It shows me past due students at the very top. So if you go into this progress monitoring, you will see any students that are past due at the top, and then it will show you any students that are due for that week underneath that child or underneath those children. So I could also look for a specific class. And it's going to show me any students that are past due for that class. And then underneath the past due, any students for that week that need to be progress monitored. This is also where I would go in to assess the maze assessment for a group of students. So this allows me to then to select the students that are going to take the maze assessment. So that's that green assess button. So you'll log into this regular platform to administer an assessment, and just make sure you're on a touchscreen device that has that app on it, and then you'll be able to assess students. The passages are the same exact passages because we're still using the Acadians assessment. And so the passages that you've been using and the testing materials for both benchmarking and progress monitoring are exactly the same. They have not changed. Any other questions that I have not addressed, or something that you're like, how do I do this on the platform? Like I said, I will be going into the Midas course and sharing the information. We'll share the slides as well as the forms or the one-page documents that I created. That you can utilize. If I have not answered your question, please drop it again in the chat, because there were so many things coming in that I think that I answered everything, but I might not have. So I want to make sure that any questions people have get answered. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to the Google form. It just asks for your name, and email address and today's date. So please put in today's date for the training so that you can get credit for it. Then this training, I have also recorded it and it will be available on our USBE assessment YouTube page. By next week. So our person's pretty good about getting stuff up there on the assessment website. So if you just Google YouTube USB assessment, or I'll also drop the link into our assessment page as well. So this training will be available, that you can go through it again if you need to. And please reach out if you have questions or if things come up, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer your questions. I will say my recommendation for teachers is that you wait until they actually have assessment data at the beginning of the year before you go in and do a training around the platform. So they're going to find it a lot more valuable if they're looking at their actual student data than some demo site data. For coaches and admin, using demo site data so that you have some familiarity with things and can start playing with it. This demo site, which will also be included in the slides that I will send you, you can go in and access that at any point to go in and play around and see how things work. And so that you feel confident to be able to help others and help your teachers and anybody else access the platform and the data for their specific students.